Hi. Yeah. Okay, so this talk is actually the first talk of a series of talks about multiple tenancy in Google Cloud. So I'm doing the overview and how the IAM being set up. Yeah. So I was going to share some perspective, but we lose like 20 minutes. So let me just fast forward. So agenda is pretty much a few, like briefly say, talk about the journey to the cloud, not just my company in general, but just in general, the journey to cloud and multiple tenancy, what it means and how to do that. What are some of the aspects you want to consider? And then IAM for multiple tenancy.
You don't unmute yourself.
No, I'm on. That is his screen. Yeah.
I apologize.
No worries. So this is not just for any for my companies. Like in general, when you move to cloud, right? If it's a large company who has built a huge data center on premise, that is probably the case, right? They have thousands of analytics analysts and data scientists and data engineer or developers, right? And the goal is to move the analytics or the entire company's data center to the cloud, right? And there will be challenges like how to meet the industry regulation when you are in cloud, right? How to migrate your data, which could be like petabyte of data, right? And how do you control the access of data in cloud, and the security aspect, networking aspect, not a lot of very, very long list, right? So the reason I want to show this is when I talk with a person who work on premise a lot, the first thing they think about is, hey, how do I get a virtual machine to begin with, right? So I feel like I should like talk about some client when you are working in cloud, right? The mindset should change. You should not think about regional servers, right? You should think about how to use serverless services from the cloud provider and build your application, right? Don't start to create a virtual machine. Virtual machine is like maybe the early days of cloud, that is probably virtual machines, but now it's like all serverless, right? So then transient, meaning you should build a good example is Dataprop or like a cluster of Apache Hadoop to process a lot of data and then shut it down, right? So in on-premise, you cannot do that, right? So think about transient clusters, transient VMs maybe, right? And then think about integration. Now you have so many services in cloud, and you should think about how to integrate multiple services instead of just think about how do I write a web application, right? Web application need to use a database, need to use other systems, networking aspect, right? And think about streaming, meaning data can now be streamed in real time, and how do you change your processing to handle that, right? In on-premise, you probably don't have this. And think about high availability also. And that is a lot easier to do in cloud. So yeah, just some mindset that I think if you are moving to cloud from on-premise, you should also consider, right? So some example applications you can build in cloud, right? This is a big data processing, lots of services. You can see why I mentioned integration, because there are so many services, right? They need to work with each other, right? How do they work with each other? That is the integration part. And then you could have on-premise or mobile device, right? Streaming in, and you could have also batch processing, right? So another example is a completely in the cloud recommendation engine, but just for a recommendation engine, you could be using so many services, right? And then, okay. So this is like the main theme of this talk is like when you implement cloud, when you start to implement cloud, these are the aspects you probably want to think about to begin with, right? Think about networking. How do you secure your network, right? Firewalls, right? Routing, DNS, right? Think about your resource in the cloud, the hierarchy of the resources, right? In Google Cloud, specifically, right? They have folders, they have projects, right? How do you organize them for your organization? And then the next aspect is data access, how to ingest your data, how to encrypt your data, mask your data, governance your data by audit, all the data access control. And then you have the infrastructure and IAM portion, which is my main focus now in this talk, right? And then you have the last layer of users, right? Using this platform to build the analytics and applications, right? So depends on the size of the team, right? You can, if it's just one person, right? You could do all of this by yourself, by this one person. If this is a startup, right? If this is a new POC from a company who has been working on premise for a long time, right? They just want to try cloud, right? This is probably in the first case. The second case is 2 teams or a couple of teams who handles different aspects, right? And then for large enterprise, we are probably looking at every aspect has a few teams to work on it, right? This is like because every aspect is there are so many things to do, and you can, if you want to make it the best platform, you have to do it, use the best people, right? So this is nobody at a large company will do this. Like each color is a different team, yeah. And because we're going to skip this. So networking and security, what are the aspects you should think about? I'm going to skip this, right? And then resource hierarchy, this is important. So I'm going to spend like 30 seconds on this. So especially for Google Cloud, right? This is how they organize the projects, right? In the top level is the organization of the whole company. Then there's folders, right? Normally each department has a folder, right? Or each larger team has a folder, and in each folder, there will be environments that development, test, or QA, or production environment, and each one is a project. So the lowest level of Google resource organization is called a Google Cloud project, right? Then under a project, there are all the services. All the services has to live inside a project. Okay. Now a little bit of data access. If a company traditionally work on relational database or Hadoop, then this is probably the only service you should start with is BigQuery, right? And then these are the aspects that you should consider. Then I'm going to focus on infrastructure and IAM. So infrastructure meaning all the resources running in the Google Cloud or your cloud provider like AWS, right? And then how do you manage them, right? So this is kind of a industry standard now. It is using Terraform to manage all the resources as code, right? And how do you do CI/CD? You can use Jenkins or any popular CI/CD tool, right? And then normally you should have a dedicated infrastructure team to enforce best practices like these privileges, like naming convention, labels, right? All that. And then
I think each cloud comes with their own specs for this code. But
Terraform is like it's like
follow Terraform. I can deploy.
Yep. Yep. So this is how this is from Terraform's website. So I have a link here so that I don't. So this is I just copy from Terraform, right? So in this part, it's all Terraform, right? But you can apply to all different cloud providers, right? That is the idea of Terraform. Then the last layer is analytics, right? This is an example of analytics. Normally, because I try to show this because this picture has a clear separation of different stages of processing data, right? Data source, ingestion, processing, warehouse, machine learning, building a lot of models. Then you have to use it, right? Deploy it to edge application or to a platform like data robot, MLOps, right? Or any MLOps platform, right? So this is the last layer. Then because we are focusing on Google Cloud, so I just want to mention Cloud Share because it's such a nice tool that you don't need there's no cost and it's so convenient for you. And a lot of times it's even faster than my laptop that has 32 gig of memory when I'm running Docker. Yeah. So this is a Docker optimized, and my laptop is probably not. So sometimes you'll be surprised that such a small container can do so much things. Yeah.
Yeah, Google's project, and then if you have internet access, you're done.
Yep. So yeah, so coming back to the project, right? A project is the lowest level of resource. These are just basics, right? Names. There are name of the project. There's also project ID, right? Project number. Normally, I would just use project name, and a project in Google will have some quotas, which new beginners might not know, but at some point you're going to hit quotas, right? Limits of API calls you can get and how many data you can process per user, all that, yeah, limitations. So then, yeah, so what I mean by a tenant. So multi-tenant basically just mean multiple team, multiple group of users who is going to share a same Google project, right? So most of the time, a tenant will be a user of the project, not the administration team of the project, right? So they should focus on just do what is the best for them. You cannot ask a data scientist to think about how are you going to provision or networking stuff, right? How are you going to secure your data, right? That is not their job. So these are called tenants, basically the users of the platform, right? So it's well, Google's recommendation is don't share a project with different groups, but there will be cases, especially for large companies, you have to share because some reasons, but of course it's easier to manage for a single team, but it requires this team maybe has more knowledge on Google Cloud itself, right? Because they have to manage themselves. It will be too many projects for all the controls that need to be in place. That now you have to implement in all these projects, right? And then if shared VPC is needed, shared VPC is a concept in Google's networking that you can use a piece of your on-premise network side range to connect to your on-premise network, right? If you have to use this, then that is the first reason you probably want to share a project because you have limited number of IP space. You are going to run out of IP space, right? If you have so many projects, yeah. So yeah, just some trade-offs, right? So I'm going to focus on multiple teams in one project, right? Then this is how, I mean, this is not a pretty picture, but the idea is this is one project, right? There's a team on the left, there's a team on the right, right? These are the private resources. And then in the middle is the shared resource. Like mostly you would just share in a group, even in shared service like Kubernetes and Cloud Composer, it's not just everybody can see everything, right? It's still like they are still in their own space, but this is shared, like, but they are separated by IAM and controls, permissions, right? So some design, if you want to put two teams in one project, right? How do you design your IAM so that two teams cannot interfere with each other's work, right? How do you control access for data? How do you set up your shared services like Kubernetes engine and Composer, right? How do you do CI/CD in multiple projects and different for different teams, right? How do you do Terraform for different teams, multiple teams in one project, right? Can the cost of each team be clearly separated? This is important for a lot of companies, right? If you want to share a project, you would need to be able to share separate the cost of each team, right? So now let's get to IAM aspect. If you are new to cloud, right? This is kind of universal concept. The name, like AWS also call it IAM, right? Identity and Access Management. So the concepts are the same. So it's basically who can take action on which resource, right? No matter it's Amazon, Azure, Google, the same, right? What IAM means is basically access control to resources that you have access to, right? So in particular, in Google Cloud, this is how it looks like. A policy will have some bindings of users and service accounts. We'll expand service account later, right? Yeah, users and service account with a certain role that is defined by Google, predefined, and then these are multiple bindings, right? So binding means I'm going to expand it in the next slide, okay? And then this IAM control, then control access to all your resources in your Google project, right? So now, if you are new to cloud or Google, even especially Google Cloud, these are the concepts you should understand, right? Users' identities normally would live in Azure AD, or if you are new, you're completely in Google, it could be just completely using Google's identity service, right? But some kind of identity service for users, for person, right? And there's a service account, which is mostly used for applications and pipelines, right? So these are called service account. These only lives inside a Google project, right? It doesn't live inside Azure AD. Okay. So what are roles? Roles is a role is a collection of permission. We're talking about, from now we are talking about only Google Cloud. Okay. So a role is a collection of permissions, multiple permissions. That could be predefined, or you can also just create your own customized role, right? And then a role will be associated with a principal. What is principal? Could be a user, could be a group, could be a service account. Normally, you will not give a role to a user only. So because this is not a good practice, right? Normally, you should give a role to a group or a service account, right? Then role binding means you give this identity or this principal the predefined role or customized role, right? This is a binding. And you can only bind one principal with one role each time, right? And the policy is basically a collection of roles and role bindings, right? If you can take away something today, for Google Cloud, I want you to take away this slide is, what is a service account? It's so complicated. Even you work on Google Cloud for a few years, you could be still confusing about service account. So a service account is just a special account identified by email-like address, right? So this is the name, my SA, and this is the project name, my project. Then after that, every service account is the same, iam.gserviceaccount.com, right? A service account is both a identity and a resource. That means you can give access to a service account to another identity, right? So as a resource, a service account can be used. There are two cases to use a service account. One is called service account user. This is called roles IAM service account user. So what this means is if a user or a group has this role on a particular service account, you will be able to use this service account you will be able to, mostly you would use it in creating a new resource that is using this service account, right? So there's another concept called service account token creator, which is gives the identity, either it's a person or another service account, the ability to impersonate this service account, to act as this service account. So I put a picture, maybe this is not the best picture I can, but try to represent this concept, right? A compute engine is running as there's a service account attached to this compute engine. So everything this compute engine VM does with Google service is going to be from this service account. It's my SA project, right? And a group of users could impersonate this service account, right? This is from between this and here, this is called a run as, all right? When you need to create a VM that run as a service account, this you need a permission of service account user, right? When you sometimes, especially when you are testing, this service account has the right permission you need. It needs to get, let's say, access data, right? And then you would want to impersonate this service account. Now you need this another role called service account token creator, which basically you can directly get a token that is associated with this service account and then run as this like impersonate service account, right? And then so there are special service account in the project, like default service account, like there's a project number and compute. So there are all kinds of, so I have a, in Google document, you can look at what are all the default service accounts Google use. And then there are also Google managed service account, service engines. So the IAM expert or multiple tenants normally would include these aspects. Like you normally have a central infrastructure team. You grant these privilege to each team in this project, right? And then you enforce some naming convention, labels, and security. And this team will also do IAM as code, right, using Terraform. So what I mean by these privilege, this is like universal in security, right? You only grant the permissions needed for a certain task. You don't give a user administration permission on a VM, right? Like that is too dangerous if a user is not, doesn't know what he or she is doing, right? Or if the user's identity is compromised, right? It's going to be dangerous for the whole network. So on a whole virtual machine, right? So you only grant enough permission to do the job, right? So you should differentiate human access and service account access because they're different. A person's access to Google Cloud is normally for a UI, Google Console, right? And or some initial code development, right? That permission is going to be different when a service account is needed to run a pipeline like processing data using Dataproc. A Dataproc is a Hadoop, Apache Hadoop service from Google, right? So a service account, you normally should not give any user, any group, access to the project default service account. This is like the best practice. And each team should have their own service account so that whenever they do anything, all the code, all the pipelines, all the data processing run as this service account, right? So that you can understand why you should not keep default service account for a group. Then there will be too much privilege for them, right? So when you design your IAM, normally so this is the first thing. What are the common resources for a team, right? So normally, when you are doing analytics, right, they should at least have a data set, which is a BigQuery. It's kind of like a database in traditional relational database, right? And there's a bucket, which is a storage service, right? You can create a code bucket, you can create a data bucket, right? For this team. And in low environment, meaning in development environment, right? You only give the group, and you can give both the group and both the service count administration of the data set and buckets. In a higher environment, normally you just give permission to the service count, but not a person. By higher environment, if you are not, meaning in your test and production or QA environment, not in your development phase. Your development is done, you have to move it to a higher environment, right? And then some basic this permission from the UI, mostly from console, right? For example, you should give user list all the buckets. That is okay. They can see all the buckets name, right? But they don't necessarily have access to all, like read permission to each bucket, right? And for BigQuery, when you are doing cross account, cross project data access, this is one special permission you need to be able to run a BigQuery job in one project. It's called BigQuery jobs create, right? And also, a user should be okay to view all the logs, given that you don't print out your password in the logs, right? And then monitoring, basic monitoring and creating alerts should be okay for everybody, right? So this is like common permissions in this project for every team, right? And a little bit about permission levels. There are two levels of permissions, right? In project level, you only give console access, like list all the buckets and list, and you should prefer to give permission at resource level, right? For example, PubSub is the messaging service for Google, right? There are these different kinds of roles. These roles can be given at project level and resource level, meaning a PubSub topic level, right? You should, because it's a shared environment, now you want to give them only at resource level, right? And in terms of Terraform, there are three different kinds of bindings for given permission to a certain to a PubSub topic. So normally I would use IAM member so that it doesn't override existing permissions. So the service that supports multiple tenancy in Google Cloud right now, I try to list all of them. I might have missed some of them, right? So these are the services that has good support already for multiple teams sharing one project. These are not quite there yet, right? I was planning to do a demo because the delay all the, so I'm not going to do the demo. But I do have GitHub code, like Toy GitHub code, and using, and then that can create a multi-tenancy resources in one project, right? And then these are some validation that I did, that I basically only validate like team A. So this is called this is I think I'm impersonating a service account called SA. This is called impersonate. I'm because I have to test if this service account has the right permission. So I'm impersonating this service account with this permission to this bucket, right? And then so this validates that the permission I set up for DE team is empty, right? So because the bucket is empty, so but there's no error message, right? But if you try to use a data science team's bucket, it's going to say no, right? So this is, of course, this is a very, very simple example. Like you can go very, very sophisticated in every one of these services to achieve a multi-tenancy using some good design, right? So I'm not going to talk about the rest because of the time, but we do, while doing this, we do have start to create a framework that we can handle multiple tenancy at a very large scale that can sustain, right? So I can share the slides, and then if you're interested, you can email me. We can talk about this. All right, I think I should end. I cut my 1 hour talk to 30 minutes. Okay, all right. Thank you.